Good morning, Kevin.
Morning, Bede. How are you?
Good, thanks.
What are we talking about today?
What we're going to do is we're going to cover a very interesting, what I found a distinction that enables us to really understand the difference between what it means to be free and what it means to be not free in terms of ourselves as an individual. And I want to go into that today because it's an unfolding by Swami Dayananda that enables you to understand our life in a much clearer and easier way.
Good, great.
Okay?
Yeah.
So he wrote a book called Action Reaction, and he made a very interesting distinction between personality and person.
Mm-hmm.
And what this fundamentally means is I exist in this world as an individual. Is that right?
Yeah.
And because we're talking about karma yoga, we're not dealing about resolution of it, that individuality in totality. That's Vedanta.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about ourselves as an individual, and the whole question is that this individual life of mine can sometimes be characterized by upset, anger, loneliness, sadness, dissatisfaction, interpersonal conflict. You know the drill.
Mm-hmm.
So this individual life of mine, and the basis of which is, according to Swami Dayananda's teaching, fear
Mm-hmm.
and self-dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
Okay, so what he means by fear is that we all have a fear of being annihilated. That's the major fear, being annihilated, not existing.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have, and because we're identified, we take our life and being to be our thoughts, feelings, sensations, and actions.
Mm-hmm.
Because we take ourselves to be this object in the world, what happens is that consciously or unconsciously, we're incredibly afraid. And this fear is extraordinary. And the way he framed how we can understand this fear, it's, I hate being what I'm like.
Mm-hmm.
I hate being what I'm like. He called this self-dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
So often in my life, I am being governed by this fear and this self-dissatisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm angry, when I'm lonely, when I'm feeling like I'm a loser, all of these things, these are an expression of this core problem that's centered on me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the big question is okay, so normally speaking, that constitutes what I consider my life as an individual. Is there any other possibility?
Yeah.
And if there is another possibility, what does that actually mean?
Mm.
So what we're talking about here is the transformation, the psychological transformation of the individual, which is what Swami Dayananda's teaching on karma yoga is all about. The transformation of me as an individual.
Yeah.
And when we talk about transformation in Latin, trans means across and form, going from one form to another. So when we're talking about the transformation of ourselves as an individual, we're talking about a transformation of the form that I am being, what I'm being.
Yeah.
Okay? And so in order to look at myself as an individual and look at, well, what are the possibilities, what exists for me as an individual, and what possibilities are open to me to move in the direction of what he calls being free while living. Mm-hmm. Swami Dayananda's whole teaching is about the discovery of and the learning what it means to be free while I'm living in this life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and in order to understand him in the correct way, this is the context of all of his teaching. All of his teachings fit in this context. And if we listen and read and look at it is teaching from this context, we will understand him in the right way. Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
Can I ask a question about personality, and behind it is fear and insecurity?
yeah, it's not
Yeah.
behind it. No, personality is the fear and the self-dissatisfaction in action. It's not like you've got personality and this behind it.
Yeah.
What you're looking at is personality is the dramatization of that fear and that self-hatred. I hate being what I'm like in a particular form.
And so fear is, he also called fear at times insecurity.
Yeah, it's the same thing, yeah.
Yeah. But in this, as personality, we're not normally aware of this because of self-defense mechanisms, are we?
Yeah, we're gonna go into that. Okay, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna look at the two options. There's only two options available to us in life, really. Okay, so and the first thing that we notice when we're talking about a daily life is that we're always facing life. Is that true?
Yeah. It's
always facing what's happening. We're in front of what's happening. Okay, now for Dayananda, there are four categories of experience that we're always facing. Okay, because I'm living as an individual, I see what's happening in relation to my individual life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
It's not just something happening out there. It's so. First of all, we're facing or experiencing something that we like. Okay, and then we're facing something that's more than what we like. And then we're facing something that is less than what we like. And then the opposite to what we like. Now this, because of the way the universe works, this is never going to change. The idea that we can make it so that our life is only full of what we like and more than what we like is a futile, infantile dream. Okay?
Yeah.
But what we notice is when these events happen, when we're facing these experiences that are happening, what happens is we are completely being, the way we are being is being determined by what's happening in front of us. Okay, so for example, if you insult me in some way, you tell me that I'm an idiot, and suddenly I'm angry and upset. As far as I'm concerned, the experience is that you have made me upset. Is that true?
Yeah, that's a common experience.
Yep. And that means, though, in terms of freedom, what does that mean? That means that I'm being determined by something external to me.
Yeah.
So what's in front of me is making me be in a certain way. So if I'm upset with you and I am believing that you have caused my condition, the way I am being, am I free?
No.
No. What's happened is that the experience in front of me is like a puppet master. It just simply, this happens, and then I suddenly find myself like that. But then another time you might say, well, Bede, I think you're actually a wonderful human being. Really? So again, I feel that you have made me happy. So you're again determining the way I'm being, aren't you? Now, Swami Dayananda called this an emotional yo-yo life. We're constantly being shaken this way and that way, positively and negatively. Okay, so we're just constantly being determined by what's happening in front of us. Now, obviously, this is not freedom.
Yeah.
This is a life of psychological enslavement. Okay?
Yeah.
So I choicelessly find myself being upset, angry, tense, worried, hostile, whatever. Okay?
Not a good situation, is it?
No, but you see, he didn't get, because he was rather illumined as an individual. He understood that this this non-freedom is a sense of identity. So what happens? It's a way of being, or what he called an attitude.
Yeah.
In other words, you say something I don't like, and I suddenly find myself being angry. Every aspect of me is involved in that anger. I'm being the anger, the tone of voice, the jaw, my tendency to attack you back. All of that is a way of being.
Which is much more than just an angry idea passing through the mind.
Yeah. We're not talking about that now. So yeah. I don't want to go into that at the moment. But what I'm saying is that, and this way of being is what he called personality. And personality is built up from our built-in reactions. And the fundamental built-in reaction for us as human beings, once we've identified with the thinking, the feeling, the sensory, the sensations and the actions, the fundamental built-in reaction to being that is fear and self-dissatisfaction. That fear and self-dissatisfaction is dramatized in various ways, many different ways, but it's the same core issue.
By dramatized, you mean it's acted out.
It's acted out, yes. Yeah, it literally becomes my life. When I'm angry, I've become my anger. I and my anger, like we were talking about last week, is exactly the same. My life and being is the anger. So, but I can also be caught up in imagination, can't I? You know, have you ever suddenly realized you've been imagining things, daydreaming for the last 3 or 4 minutes?
Yeah.
So we're constantly being enclosed in this thing, me as an imaginer, me as an angry person, me as a sad person, me as a lonely person, me as a bored person.
Being that, we're not aware that we're being it. We're not, as an idea, we're just being it.
We're just being it, and we're chopping and changing.
Yeah.
What characterizes human life is we're constantly being shaken by what's happened. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just, and we're enclosed in this sense of ourselves. So, and ever since we've been a little child, we've had experiences happen to us, and these experiences are built into us. And these experiences that are built into us come out as reactions today.
And when you say enclosed, you're meaning that we're actually not aware we're being angry. We actually feel quite right and justified in.
No, it's not so much that. When you're angry, does it feel like you're choosing to be angry, or you just can't help it?
Just can't help it.
We're helplessly enclosed. Even if I want to stop being angry, I can't. Well, when we're enclosed in personality, we're enclosed. There is no freedom.
And all of my thoughts conform to the different attitudes.
Yeah.
Being angry, I have angry thoughts. And that's,
Being sad, I'll have sad thoughts. Being fearful, I'll have fearful thoughts.
Yeah.
So personality is a way of being in the world that's based on the form that this way of being in the world takes is determined by our past experiences. But the basis of it for Swami Dayananda is ignorance of who and what we really are. Ignorance of what it means to be, Ignorance of what my life and being really is. That's the basis of it. But the form it takes is like what our Western psychologists say. It's based on past experience. And so so when I'm facing these 4 categories of experience, what happens is personality is constantly coming into operation as elation, as sadness, as anger, as boredom, as daydreaming, as, it's just constantly being revivified, made alive again. And out of this, but it's not just simply, personality is not just simply reactions, it's always a sense of identity. Okay, it's always an experience of myself, what I am, the what I am.
Being a certain way.
Yeah, and I say to myself, I am angry, I am sad, I am lonely, I am pissed off, I'm whatever it is. It's constantly coming into operation. And even when I think about myself, when I'm thinking about myself, even that thinking about myself is personality. Because I've got an idea of myself and then I'm either upset about it or happy about it.
Yeah.
So this is what he meant by personality.
And we think it's normal because it's so common.
It's not so much normal. We think it's our very life and being. When you think about yourself, you automatically go, oh yeah, I'm Bede and I'm from New Zealand and I've had these experiences. So when I think about myself, I think about the future, I think about the past, I'm thinking about the future, what's going to be this destiny for this self. So, I'm thinking about myself in the present, oh, I'm such an idiot, or I'm so fantastic, I'm better than others, I'm less than others, whatever it is, it's constantly in operation. But, remember the snake and the rope metaphor? When I'm experiencing a snake as reality, that's false, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
It's untrue. It's not real. So ourselves as personality is, in the light of Swami Dayananda's teaching, is not true and real. It's completely false. He said that's very lucky because the false can disappear, by the way. So it's not that it's bad, but the thing is that when I'm being personality, I'm not being true or real. I'm not full of the true and the real. I'm full of the false and the unreal.
So that's what Dayananda would call subjectivity?
Yeah, I don't want to look at it like that at this moment, okay? So I don't want to confuse terms, Kevin. So the thing is that here I am, I'm full of this fear and I hate being what I'm like. And then I want to do something about that fear and this hate being what I like. So I become emotionally dependent on people and things.
That are going to remove the sad attitudes or...
Well, no, that's going to anesthetize, make it seem like it disappears. So my destiny, when I'm full of that fear, the sense of identity of fear and self-dissatisfaction, what's going to happen is I'm going to have inordinate cravings, just absolute love. I will love certain experiences, maybe being thought of as good or pleasure or whatever it is. I'll be full of obsessive love for certain things. I'll be full of obsessive fear about certain things, and I'll be full of hatred about certain things and people. So being enclosed in personality is not a good look.
So when you say that you have hate towards certain people, it's because you think they they are causing you pain or upsets or whatever.
What happens is that because I'm so fearful and I hate myself, that's another word for self-dissatisfaction. I hate being what I'm like.
Mm.
I will then love certain things. I will feel that there are certain things in the world that I desperately need in order for me to be secure and happy.
Mm.
And if you disturb them or take them away from me, I can't help but hate you, consciously or unconsciously. Swami Dayananda called these binding desires.
Yeah.
In other words, you see, we can't help but seek what we think is good.
Mm.
It's a question of whether or not it is good. We might be seeking the good in the wrong place, but when we are full of fear and self-hatred, we have this emotional dependence on the world.
Mm.
And we also have a desire, believe it or not, to preserve our sense of identity. Because to preserve the person we've always been is to have existence. And the fear of not being that is phenomenal. That's why people will sometimes get themselves into all sorts of trouble, because what they're doing is, it's like when they live the drama out of who they take themselves to be, they are literally preserving their life. And sometimes people preserve that life by even painful experiences.
So when I'm blaming someone,
Yep.
I'm blaming because I feel they've hurt me or disappointed me in some way.
Yes.
And I'm holding in place that hurt or disappointment when I dramatize it.
Yeah, but what you're doing is you're holding in place you as a person who's subject or a victim of the actions of others.
Mm.
And if you look at your life, you see what Freud found very interesting was that you have this phenomena, what he called repetition compulsion. You had people who, a young girl who had a father who was an alcoholic who beat her up.
Mm.
Then when she got older, she fell in love with a man, and guess what type of person she fell in love with? An alcoholic who beat her up.
Mm.
Now, as far as she was consciously concerned, she felt she was seeking happiness.
Mm.
But in actual fact, she had an unconscious appetite for the very interactions that had formed her identity in the first place. And so she has an unconscious desire to maintain a sense of identity. For Dayananda, the whole problem was identity. Freud thought it was a death wish, but for Dayananda, we seek to preserve ourselves. And then she got rid of that guy, and guess what? She went looking for love and happiness again, and she met another man. And guess what? He was an alcoholic and beat her up.
Mm.
And then she did it the third time. So what's going on here? What's going on here is the fear of annihilation is so strong that we seek to preserve ourselves as personality, as a sense of identity, because we take this to be our very life. And we have to keep our life going, don't we? How strong do you think self-preservation is?
Extremely strong.
That's exactly why people don't change, because they're enclosed in personality, which is a defensive structure against annihilation. And not only that, there's a sense of, at the core of it, I hate being what I'm like. And then there's all of these strivings. So we have these experiences. We have these experiences of experiences we love, we fear, and we hate. And so, and what happens is that constantly, what happens when we're facing those four categories of experiences I like, more than what I like, less than what I like, and opposite to what we like, there's this constant reactivity happening. I'm literally being the reactions. Oh, that's good. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, yeah. It's just, there's no sameness. There's only chopping and changing. And this literally is darkness. We're suffering from darkness. We are being the darkness. We are being what we are not.
But we think we're quite conscious in this state.
We do. Within the dream of human life, the dream of being a personality, a thing in the world of things, we take this to be our life and being. And then we try and fix up personality. We try and fix it up. But that's personality trying to fix itself. Do you know what I mean? That's like trying to rearrange the chairs on the Titanic. But the most important thing with this is to see that this way of living, and the thing is too, personality can be very ugly in terms of form, but it can also be socially acceptable. A smooth talking person who's very good at, you know how politicians and sociopaths are very good at human relations, aren't they?
Absolutely.
But it's just complete crock. But the thing is that if I find myself performing socially well, and I'm feeling myself being a good look in my own eyes and the eyes of other people, that's still personality. Yeah. It's myself as an object that I'm thinking about. Have you ever thought about yourself, Kevin?
Yes, Bede.
Yeah, well, when you're thinking about yourself, Swami Dayananda says that's delusional. Because you're thinking about an idea that you take to be yourself. And he says that any idea you have of yourself is not true.
Yeah.
Are you with me? So now the big question comes is, okay, if this is the case, if this is my existential situation, I'm enclosed in this way of being, which he calls personality. Is there another possibility? Now, fundamentally, when we look at personality, it's being untrue and unreal. Would that be true?
Yeah.
So it's being false and it's not true. It's not real.
But we take it to be real.
Yes. And we literally take our experience of ourselves as ourselves. Just exactly the same way we take the rope to be a snake. That's an experience. It's not reality. But we take that experience of the snake as true, don't we?
Yeah.
And as real. So the big question remains then, well, how does a person who is untrue and unreal, what is the remedy? And first of all, can he dig himself out from within the delusion? Can I dig myself out? If I'm looking at a snake from within the delusion, can I get out of the delusion?
No, it's not possible.
Okay, so myself as personality am absolutely helpless. I can't do anything about myself.
Yeah.
Okay, now, this is where Swami Dayananda's teaching becomes very, very interesting. The only thing that can free me from personality, from being personality, because we don't want to go, oh, it's my personality's doing it. No, because the one who's saying that's personality, being irresponsible. It's my personality that got angry. No, I'm being angry. I'm being angry.
Yeah.
Okay? So we don't want to go into this, it's my ego that did it and all that nonsense.
Or my mind did it, or I've got it tenacious.
All of that stuff, yeah.
That's all personality.
All personality.
Being personality.
Yes. Now, Swami Dayananda has a very interesting thing, is that when I am full of the true and the real, I am transformed into being true and real. So when I'm filled with the presence of reality, because the personality is unreality. So when I'm filled with the presence of reality, I become true and real, and what he called, in other words, I become conscious. I wake up to life as it is. I come alive to facts. But I'm only alive to facts when I'm full of the presence of those facts. See, Swami Dayananda considered our problem is we're full of ourselves instead of being full of reality. And he considered the presence of reality as therapeutic in itself. It is, the presence of reality is the only thing, the presence of reality appreciated is the only thing that liberates us from ignorance. So if, and notice how that doesn't come from me as personality. I can't dig myself out.
No.
Okay? Now.
You can only be receptive to that.
I can only receive the presence of the given into my life, the presence of what actually is. Now, a very interesting thing used to happen when we were in India. Every morning, they would lead us through a process of meditation back to ourselves as a simple, conscious person, what Swami Dayananda called a simple, conscious person. So we'd sit down and you know, we were normally, of course, enclosed in personality. That's how it works. And then what he would do, they would always, first of all, relax the body so that we start to relax. Then they go through a process of accepting everything, so that and through acceptance, when I'm accepting everything, then things can come in as they are, can't they? If without accepting, that doesn't happen. And then we just simply arrive at ourselves as a simple conscious presence, full of the presence of the given, the living presence, what Swami Dayananda calls the given, the presence of the given. Now, we know what this is like. Have you ever been out in the trees and the bushes sometimes walking, and you just suddenly, for some reason, you find yourself simply being alive to facts, and within that aliveness to facts, the alive to the trees, the bushes, and everything else, because you're filled up with the presence of the given, you disappear as a striving, fighting, struggling, thinking person, don't you?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Yeah, you haven't changed from being an unpleasant, unhappy personality to being a happy personality. What's happened is that the very sense of identity, the very you being a personality is resolved into reality. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Swami Dayananda called this the resolution of ego into Ishvara. And we've talked about why Ishvara is the presence of God in the form of this universe. All right, so the very presence of the given is the presence of the giver. So the living presence of what's here, right now as I am, is the presence of God. Just like a clay pot, the pot is the presence of clay, isn't it? So when so as soon as I'm filled up with the presence of the given, myself as untrue and unreal disappears.
Yeah.
And I literally become true and real as a person.
And my selfish personality disappears.
Yes.
As the upset person or the disappointed person or
The confused person or the antagonistic, whatever, yeah.
Struggling person disappear.
And I am filled with the true and the real. And when I'm filled with the living presence of God in the form of the presence of the given, I'm lifted out of personality, or what you were saying before, subjectivity.
What's amazing is that we don't, when we're in the subject being personality, we
Yeah.
don't know that. It's only when you discover the true and the real, you realize you're off with the pixies.
Yes, when you really see that what that means to be yourself as a simple conscious person, it's only from that place can you see what you've normally been like. And the thing, go.
When I'm in personality, I think I am living in the world, but I didn't know I was full of my own notions about the world and myself.
Well, interestingly enough, being personality involves living in a world that is projected out from that. So what happens is when you're angry, you're looking at SOBs and people worthy of punishment and retaliation. Is that true?
Yeah, and a stuffed world.
Yes, and when you're sad, you're looking at a sad world. When you're fearful, you're looking at a frightening world. And everybody within personality is trying to deal with the object that they feel is upsetting them. They think that the problem is the object that they're resisting. They don't realize that the resistor itself is the problem. Swami Dayananda uses a phrase that when you're lifted out of personality, he says the fighter in you disappears. The fighter in you disappears. What?
The fighter is the resistor.
The fighter is the resistor, yeah.
Wanting something to be different, not accepting receiving.
Yeah, well, no, you can want something to be different. That's fine, but it's when you become a wanter. We can see that, for example, when it's cold, you might want to, put a jacket on.
Yeah.
But it's when my sense of identity is being a wanter. You see, and the only reason that I'm a wanter is that I'm dissatisfied in myself. I'm hating being what I'm like, and I want to be something different. So I've actually got something in mind. I want to be this in order to deal with this being this. It's called what Swami Dayananda calls a life of becoming. But what's interesting is that when you are being yourself, when you're actually resting in the lap of reality, when you're dwelling in reality, he called that being relaxed in Ishvara's lap. Now, we've got to be clear, we're not talking about bliss here. For example, if you are grieving because someone has died, there are two things. You can either become the grief, so then you become a sad person, is that right? And your sense of identity and that pain of grief is one and the same, is that true?
Yeah.
So you say, I'm sad. But there is an alternative. You see, I can remain with the process of grieving without resistance. So I'm alive to what's happening. Particularly when I understand that grieving is that the presence of God is not away from that grieving. That enables me to face grief, the process of grieving, in an entirely different way.
So it allows you, for example, to cry without trying to think whether you should or shouldn't be crying, or trying to just allow.
Yeah, all that nonsense. If you lose your son, you will find yourself crying.
Yeah.
What do you do? Oh, because I'm spiritual and I'm conscious, and so I don't feel anything. Well, that's nonsense. But the difference is you remain in communion with what is. You're remaining true and real because you're alive to what's happening. And because of the psychological laws, you find yourself crying. So what? It's still, what you're facing is the presence of God in the form of sadness. So it's not a matter of, so this is complete non-denial. You know how I said that the basis of personality is non-acceptance of facts?
Yeah.
The transformative factor is this attitude of open acceptance, what he calls graceful acceptance. It's actually an openness and aliveness to what's happening without resistance. And so then I'm being conscious. Because for Swami Dayananda, the point was to be alive to facts, not to deny the facts. So in terms of whenever we're facing what's happening consists of what's happening, plus also our reactions to what's happening. That's also, we need to be alive to, what he says is we need to live in Ishvara's world. In other words, we want to live in the world of the given, the presence of the given. So if the presence of the given is a feeling of sadness, is that just a fact to be received and being alive to? Yes. So the whole point here is that unless we're full of reality, we are not real. We're also not true, we're being false. And the whole point is our real life is actually a non-dimensional conscious presence. You see, yourself as a person, you can't think about. You can only be a simple conscious person. If I start thinking of myself as a simple conscious person, I'm making that into an object. That's personality. I'm caught up again. So, and so the interesting thing here is this, is that at any one moment, right here, right now, as I am, I'm either being personality or I'm being a simple conscious person. There's no midway.
They're mutually exclusive.
They're mutually exclusive, yeah.
What a blessing that is.
Yeah. Yes, because the thing is that, but I cannot be conscious without Ishvara. Because when I'm filled with the presence of what is, and and what I mean by that is you're always filled with the presence of what is from a certain point of view, right? But from your own perspective, is that how Swami Dayananda put it, the way you invite Ishvara into your life is by being aware of him. And what he means by aware of him, he means the presence, the living presence of the given is to be aware of Ishvara. So whatever that given is. So what happens is, here I am, I'm upset, then suddenly, have you ever had that experience, you're upset, then suddenly awareness comes in and you suddenly cease to be upset? Because when you're filled with the presence of reality, that presence of reality appreciated is the transformative factor. That's what lifts you out of being enclosed in personality.
And I don't do that. I can only receive.
Yeah, absolutely not. It's the action of God's presence on us that does that. And this is a wonderful thing to understand in terms of a spiritual understanding, because as soon as I recognize that I'm caught up, I'm upset or angry, what do I need to do? I'm just going to let God come into my life.
You just wait.
And I sit there and wait. That's all I do. I sit there and wait.
Because normally what I would do when I'm doing personality is I'd resist it or struggle and try and change something.
Yeah, that's right. Now, bear in mind, as we've said before, we need to change our conduct when we see that it's not helpful. So in terms of functional living, this is what they call by Dharma. But what's important, so Dharma is to do with conduct, and that keeps us in harmony with what is. But what brings us into the world as it is, he calls this, formally it's called graceful acceptance. And he says this graceful acceptance is born out of our understanding of what God is, our understanding of Ishvara. So when we understand that the very living presence of what is, the presence of the given, the living presence of the given is the living presence of God. When we understand that, what happens is we sit there. So let's say, for example, I'm upset, I'm shaking and I'm upset like this. if I just simply remain as I am, because that's honest, I'm being alive to facts, aren't I? I'm upset and agitated, and I remain where I am, I'm not reacting, because I'm not in personality anymore. I'm just simply being conscious and alive to what's happening. I don't care whether I'm agitated. What happens is, as the presence of God is more and more appreciated, that very presence, that very light that is God, unravels me and lifts me out of being shaken. And what happens is, I find myself gracefully accepting. That doesn't mean I have to say I like it, but but this graceful acceptance is not something I'm doing. It arises out of the very fact that of my understanding of what God is as He unfolded.
That He's never away from any experience or appearance, and you can only receive Him. You can't do God, if you like.
No. You can only invite Him into your life by being aware of Him. Being aware of God is not being aware of like an object over there. Being aware of God is also you see, and what's important is, when I'm resting in the lap of God, when I'm being gracefully accepting, there's no resistance, so personality isn't present, because only through resistance does personality exist.
Yes, that's
it. So when I'm being at home with myself, you cannot be at home with yourself by yourself. You can only be at home in God. You can only reality. So when I'm at home with myself, what happens to the self-dissatisfaction, that feeling of I hate being what I'm like? What happens to it?
Disappears.
It absolutely disappears. So what we're talking about here is that it's only when I'm filled with the presence of the given, my mind is filled entirely with the presence of the given. Because it's there, I'm seeing it. That is the only thing that lifts me out of personality. So the presence of God appreciated is the transformative factor. There is nothing else. And this frees me from the fact that that's where I find my refuge. We try to find refuge in the world. As personality, our refuge is in the world. In other words, our refuge is nice experiences that we like and more than what we like. And the danger is less than what we like and opposite to what we like. That's the danger. But in this attitude of graceful acceptance, this exists above the contraries of human experience: pleasant, unpleasant, painful, painful, comfortable. Because in our Western scriptures, we talk about the secret place of the Most High. This is when you're rooted in God, you have a stability that is given, and this is, and the only thing that opens our eyes or transforms this, that brings about this graceful acceptance, is our understanding or knowledge of what God is, which is the wisdom that Swami Dayananda unfolded. And his understanding of God brings about a psychological transformation of the individual. So instead of fear and self-hatred, what happens is when we are actually in communion with what is, when we're filled with the presence of the given, not filled with our delusions and our, what he calls our world. He says your problem, Kevin, is that you're full of yourself. And you need to be full of God.
Full of my notions about myself and others that I take.
Yeah. So what happens is when we are rooted in reality, we become true and real. But there is the psychological changes. Instead of being agitated and resisting and tense, we find ourselves being composed. Instead of being enclosed in psychological slavery by being determined by the presence of and absence of objects, we find ourselves being psychologically free.
Not
And
dependent,
lastly, instead of being full of self-hatred and self-dissatisfaction, we find ourselves being at home with ourselves.
not compulsively needing to seek objects and to make us happy.
But because we're happy already.
Yes.
See, when we're self-accepting, now for Swami Dayananda, self-acceptance doesn't mean the usual one where I make myself into an object and I go, yeah, I've got good parts and bad points, but now, but I accept myself. What he means by self-acceptance, I'm actually literally being myself without resistance. Without resistance. That means if there's grieving going on, I'm with myself, remaining with myself without resistance in the face of that grieving. In Latin, the word suffering means to undergo. I'm openly and gracefully undergoing what my experience is. There is absolutely no denial. So the whole point, go.
Given if it
Can you talk up a bit, Kevin, please?
Given if I spend a lot of time in personality, there will necessarily need to be a process of willingly undergoing some suffering because of the absence of presence of the appreciation of God, if you like.
No. But what it depends on what I mean by suffering. You're not going to get rid of physical suffering. Do you know what I mean? I'm not talking about that. Our psychological reactions happen according to laws. I need to gracefully accept all of those as well. So we've got to be careful of that. We can, even in the face of painful emotions, we can remain the same. The whole practice of karma yoga is remaining the same. You can't remain the same unless you're being gracefully accepting, and you can't be gracefully accepting unless you understand God in the sense that Swami Dayananda means it. He says there's no karma yoga without Ishvara.
Yeah.
And so once you understand that every aspect of your experience, no matter what it is pervaded by the presence of God. That enables you to face things differently. And because it doesn't mean that we are going to both of us going to face old age, sickness, and death, either of our spouse and our friends or ourselves. That's not pleasant. That's not comfortable. But the question is where do I take my refuge? If my refuge is in the human body, my identification with my physical self, that I take myself to be a biological organism, that is the most terrifying event. There's no refuge in that.
Yeah.
So we have this distinction: ourselves as personality and ourselves as a simple conscious person. Ourselves as a simple conscious person is a possibility that is available to us right here, right now, as we are. And the thing too is that when I'm just simply being myself, resting in the presence of reality, I am now true and real.
In that possibility, it's not like I need to know a lot. I know a lot. I just need to understand that.
Or how Swami Dayananda would put it is that when I see what it means to be a simple conscious person, I can be a simple conscious person.
Yeah.
When I see what that means, that's what knowledge is. He says we need knowledge, which is the wisdom, the recognition of what it. He always used to say, see the meaning. So when we see the meaning of what it means to be a simple conscious person, we can then live that understanding. We can live that wisdom.
So you can't see more than you know.
You can't see, no. The only way we can see this is by what he calls by knowledge. So when he opens our eyes to what God is, we come to an appreciation of ourselves that's entirely different. And we discover that our life and being is God. It's not something I have. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. So this simple conscious person, that's born of the understanding of what Dayananda means being a prayerful attitude, isn't it? Is that right?
Well, no, not quite. I don't want to go into that now. But what what I'm saying is that when I'm simply being conscious, the only way I can be conscious is if I'm present, if I'm full of the living presence of the given.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I come back to myself here, as is, the living presence of what's given's here, the TV, the physical sensations. When I'm full of the given, because it's here, I'm seeing it, I'm what he calls objective. I'm full of objects, aren't I?
Yeah, yeah.
Then I'm conscious.
So you can't think this out, can you?
No. It's only an understanding you can live.
That you can receive and live.
Yeah, but well, you receive the knowledge, but it's something you live.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Like in the sense that once you understand what it means to be a simple conscious person, you can be a simple conscious person when you remember. But you see, when you suddenly find yourself uptight, suddenly the spiritual understanding comes in. Oh, you're uptight, you're enclosed in personality. The very understanding that you're enclosed in personality comes from Swami Dayananda's teaching, doesn't it? But you're now seeing the meaning of what it means to be enclosed in personality, and then you know where the solution is to be full of God. So you then just so you find the spiritual understanding will govern what you do in a sense. You just go, and you'll just simply remain as you are, and you will simply wait for the action of God's presence in your life, won't you?
Yeah, yeah.
Because of the spiritual understanding. That's what he means by living the wisdom. But none of this is, it's not to do with function. This is not caused by the thinking, the feeling, the senses, or the actions. This is literally an understanding or a wisdom that obtains in us when we understand what he's saying, and then we can live that understanding.
So I can't do acceptance.
No, you can't do acceptance.
I can only find myself being accepting.
Yes, if you're abiding in the vision of God that he unfolds. And that's why being a simple conscious person is not separate from God. Because it's the appreciation of the presence of God. You become conscious when you're abiding in the appreciation of the presence of God.
I think another name Swami Dayananda has for the simple conscious person is the devotee, and the devotee provides.
Yeah, that's right. But I don't want to go into that now. I just want to concentrate on just because he explains this in different ways. But I want to highlight there is you as personality, and you as simple basic person. And you as a simple basic person are conscious because you're filled with the presence of what is. The presence of the given, the living presence of the given. When you're enclosed in personality, you're full of yourself. You're caught up in ideas and notions and things like that.
It's quite humbling to realize most of my life has been spent in full of myself, full of my knowledge about myself and other people. That's
why Shakespeare Shakespeare explained personality the best. He said, it's a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury that signifies nothing.
Yes.
And in our Western scriptures, we have a saying, I of mine own self can do nothing, the Father within me doeth the work. Yeah. In other words, when I sit quietly with myself, which Swami Dayananda, as I am, which Swami Dayananda calls contemplation, and when I have a disposition, when I have an interest in just simply remaining with myself as I am, he calls that a contemplative disposition. If you just sit with yourself and you simply wait, you will find that you will just simply be filled up with the presence of God, and you'll come to understand things you would never have thought about. But it's just simply things become evident.
Doesn't require thinking as we normally think.
No, contemplation isn't thinking about something like it is being contemplative. In other words, the object of contemplation and the subject of object contemplation become one and the same. I'm remaining with myself as I am. But you can't do that without the understanding of God. So we have two things: enclosed in personality and being a simple conscious person. And when we're facing our life, either that life is going to be met with ourselves as personality or ourselves as a simple conscious person. There's the basis of responsiveness, conscious responsiveness, or what Dayananda called action, real action. He said otherwise there's only reaction. Real action is being a simple conscious person, because that it's that which remains the same. And so being a simple conscious person establishes us in the world as it is, and conscious responsiveness in the light of Dharma keeps us in harmony with what it is. What is. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Bede.
See you later. Bye.